Hello, 3 minutes after 10 is the time. A very good morning indeed to you. Do you get those days, don't you, where you sort of think everything's a little bit backwards? And for two reasons I'm thinking that today. This story is incredible, right? It is absolutely extraordinary that in the space of 14 years, patient satisfaction with the National Health Service, which, listen, to be clear, they only actually started the records in 1983. But I think that's quite significant because that was just before or right at the beginning of Margaret Thatcher's second term. So you've got the heyday of Margaret Thatcher's premiership. You've got all of Tony Blair's. You've got all of Gordon Brown's. You've got all of David Cameron's. This is where it gets a bit hard to remember, isn't it? You've got all of Theresa May's. And then you've got all of Boris Johnson's. And then you've got all of Liz Truss's, and then you've got all of Rishi Sunak's. There you go, all of Rishi Sunak so far. So, you know, you've got a significant number of prime ministers, albeit that some of them weren't in the job for very long, presiding over the NHS. And in the space of 14 years, it has gone from our satisfaction, your satisfaction, my satisfaction, our confidence in the service has gone from the highest it has ever been in 2010. That was the peak. That was the ceiling, the zenith, to the lowest in the space of 14 years. In the space of 14 years of Tory rule. I mean, it could be a coincidence. Hands up. Hands up if you think it's a coincidence. What? Really? No one? Oh, thank you. Nadine Dorries in the corner. Nadine Dorries thinks it's a complete... Actually, no, she thinks it's Gary Lineker's fault. 14 years, it's gone from the highest it ever was to the lowest it ever was, with only 24% of people saying they were satisfied with the NHS last year in 2023. It was only 29 the previous year, but as I said, a peak of, guess what? I tell you what, I bet you 50p you don't get. I missed out John Major. No, I didn't miss out John Major. Stop trolling me, Adrian. Seriously. I didn't miss out John Major. I said John Major. Didn't I say John Major? Did I say John Major? Anyway, don't forget John Major. Him as well. What do you think it was in 2010? Go on, have a guess. Say a number out loud, or maybe not out loud if you're, listening to this with a surreptitious earphone in while you're supposed to be, I don't know, working as an air traffic controller or something. Well, what do you think it was in 2010? So if I tell you that it was 29 for 2022 and it's down to 24 for 2023, what do you think it was in 2010? This is the stuff that I talk to you about every day. You've got other people pouring into your ear the idea that David Cameron would be good for the country, that Boris Johnson would be good for the country, that Brexit would be good for the country, that Liz Truss would be good for the country, that Rishi Sunak would be good for the country, that Jacob Rees-Mogg would be a good Secretary of State for Business, that Mel Stride would be a good Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, that Jonathan Gullis would be a good Deputy Chairman of the... Congratulations, everybody. Can we all just take a moment to congratulate Jonathan Gullis on his elevation to Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party? I mean, if anybody says Rishi Sunak is brilliant at his job and not desperate at all and a superb spotter of talent, then the elevation of Jonathan Gullis to Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party is clearly and categorically the proof of that particular pudding. So go on, say enough. David, you're cheating. David, I know that you're cheating because there's no earthly way you'd have got it 100% on the money. You'd have got it like within 5% or 4%, but you're cheating. So stop cheating. You've sent it twice now, David, in Birmingham. You cheat. You cheat face. What do you think it was in 2010? If it's 24% now, how far do you think it's come down? Yeah, 70%. That'd be an A in an exam in old money. I know it's all gone a bit weird now. It'd probably be a 9 or something, or a 7. Don't text me to correct me on the exam grading system. It's gone from 70% to 24% in the space of 14 years. And I genuinely have to do this out loud with my fingers. Hang on. In the space of 14 years and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 prime... Is it 5 prime ministers? In the space of 14 years and 5 prime ministers, patient satisfaction in the NHS has plummeted from 70% to 24%. And yes, I think I did miss out John Major in my list of all the MPs that had been in charge over that entire period from 1983 to now. But it's the last 5 that matter. Can we take a moment now? Let's have a little think. What have those 5 prime ministers all got in common? Have they got anything in common? David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak. Have they got anything in common? Could possibly be, I don't know, I'm seeing the colour blue. Anyone else seeing the colour blue here? I'm seeing a sort of a corrupted blue-hued Union flag cut out in the silhouette of an oak tree. I don't know why. It's coming through to me like that. So that's what's happened, and that's what they've done. Bizarrely, Conservative voters report a marginally higher level of satisfaction with the NHS than Labour supporters do. But I suspect that is an absolutely splendid example of footballification. I suspect there are people, and thankfully I'm not one of them, and I doubt you are, but I suspect there are people who, if their party is in power, will tell a pollster that they're very happy with the NHS or the state of the railways or with any particular public service, because to say that they were very unhappy with it would be, of course, to have to acknowledge the fact that the people in charge are probably responsible for the decline that they're aware of. I also don't know how reliable it is in an objective or in a scientific fashion, because I look at the personal experiences I have, and I really like my GP, for example. I think they're great. It's sometimes, the non-urgent appointments are a little bit far off in the distance, but they're really good at urgent appointments, and I think we're really lucky. I think there's a postcode lottery when it comes to GPs, but we seem to have hit the jackpot. And yet when I look at the online ratings, they're just between 1 and 2 stars, which makes me think the only people that really go online to register a rating of a GP surgery are the people who are very cross, possibly permanently cross, possibly sort of genetically cross. So I don't know whether the same sort of thing happens here. You're more likely to provide a negative answer because things are imperfect than you are to provide a positive. But that, of course, gets undermined by the comparison. That's why the 70% figure is so significant in this conversation. It's gone through the floor. It's plummeted. It's declined at such an extraordinary rate that you'd get whiplash if you'd been watching it in real time. And I don't want to talk to patients, I don't think, today. I may change my mind. I always reserve that right. But I always think that talking about experiences with the NHS is, don't hate me for this, but it's a little bit parking tickets. Do you know what I mean? Everybody's got a story, and they're very rarely give me a ring now and tell me about your bunions. Apart from parking tickets and immigration, the best way to get the phones to ring with absolutely no guarantee of receiving a single interesting call is to say, is there anybody old out there feeling poorly? Your phone lines will ring off the hook. Your switchboard will melt under the pressure of people who feel poorly and self-identify as old. But the likelihood of us hearing anything interesting in those conversations is slim, to say the least. So it's the people in the NHS that I want to talk to today, or the people who've recently left, because I mean, I've got 3 questions, really. The first is pretty obvious. The single most important factor in this decline from your end of the telescope. Now, you might think it's obvious, but I want to get it on my list. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. The single thing that explains why the service that you slave to provide has been so violently diminished over the last 14 years. We're doing the 2010 to 2024 chapter of the NHS's history, during which period patient satisfaction has plummeted from 70% to 24%. And you, as a nurse, as a doctor, as a paramedic, as an NHS manager, and before anybody applies for Idiot's Corner this morning, the number of NHS managers in our NHS in proportionate terms is considerably lower than in most comparative services and countries. It's very much a right-wing trope that the reason why... So what happens is right-wing politicians come in, skin the NHS, and then their client journalists write articles or present programmes in which they claim that the reason why the NHS isn't doing very well is because there's too many managers. It's so binary and so bovine in its simplicity. It's a miracle anybody fell for it. But hey, this is a country that voted for Brexit. So you as a manager, as a doctor, as a GP, as a nurse, anybody who has worked in or currently works in the NHS during that window from 2010 to 24, what is the single factor you consider to be most responsible for the decline in patient satisfaction? Okay? 03456060973. Hit those numbers now. You will go through. It can be political, it can be medical, it can be logistical, it can be mechanical. Mechanical doesn't really fit in that sentence, but I just felt we had a bit of a T.S. Eliot kind of vibe going on with the language, so I threw it in there. That's a question I really want you to answer, all right? Question number 2 is about your job. And this is a bit of a strange question, because I find myself wondering what would happen to the NHS if you all started doing what the railway workers are doing in order to make their grievances land with the public and with the government and with employers. If the NHS started working to rule, what would happen? Do you see what I mean? If you only worked your contracted hours, if you took all of your breaks, if you took all of your leave, if you took all of your holidays, if you left at the minute on the dot that you were supposed to leave, you only ever put in a work when the meter was ticking, when you were working, what would happen? And that, I think, is best answered by the question of how much has your job changed between 2010 and 2024. So the biggest factor in the decline in patient satisfaction from your point of view as a provider of patient care, the biggest change in your job, viewed perhaps through the lens of what would happen if you worked to rule, if you didn't do any overtime, if you didn't do any unpaid work, if you didn't skip any of your breaks when you were on shift. Just have a little think and tell me what would actually happen. 0345 6060973. And then the hardest question perhaps for you to answer, why are you thinking of leaving? There are 2 stories this week. Well, there's one news story this week and one comment piece in the I newspaper, of which I've become a rather big fan in the last couple of years. The news story is about an exodus of nurses out of the UK. As Yasmin Brown wrote, you may not have heard this news because such information would disrupt the dark folk tales spun by many politicians and much of the media. You know how it goes. Migrants stealthily arrive, grab benefits and council homes, displace true Britons, abuse girls, worship dubious gods, defile this green and present land. But the number of departing overseas nurses is rising fast. So nurses who have come here from elsewhere to nurse are now leaving. And Yasmin posits the possibility that they are obeying the instruction from countless racists emboldened since 2016 and, of course, represented in the public space by people like Nigel Farage and 30p Lee. These nurses are actually obeying the instruction to go back where they came from. So the question of why are you thinking of leaving the NHS may include racism from the patients and a sense in the society that you inhabit. But of course it may not. So the field is wide open. You can go in on whatever you want on that. Why are you thinking of leaving? And I suppose, where are you thinking of going? So factor, change, leave. If this was a university lecture, what's the single biggest factor that you, as an NHS worker, past or present, as long as you've been on board between 2010 and 2024, what would you point to first to explain why patient satisfaction with the NHS has gone off a cliff? The second is the biggest change in your job. How much has your job changed in that period? And the third follows on from the second. If it has changed so much that you're thinking of leaving, tell me why. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Because although patient satisfaction is at an all-time low, I suspect that if somebody polled a little more nuanced on value, respect, reverence even for the NHS, which is imperfect and probably needs to undergo some fairly profound change in the coming years, in the words of Joni Mitchell, you really don't know what you've got till it's gone. Why does it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? And I took some persuading, but looking at that window, that 14-year-long window, looking at those 5 prime ministers, I don't think this has happened by accident anymore. I think this is deliberate. The problem is they're, I doubt, competent enough to know exactly what it is they're supposed to be replacing the incredibly popular NHS of 2010 actually with. But let's start with those three questions. Factor, change, leave. It's 10:18. 22 minutes after 10 is the time. Should we start the games as well? Should we start the games, the little teasers where I tell you things that I think will build a degree of tension in your fevered brain, and then I almost always forget to tell you what the actual payoff is? Should we start? Let's start with a missing headline round, shall we? Should we start with the missing headline round? North Korean television censors Alan Titchmarsh's imperialist what? North Korean television censors Alan Titchmarsh's imperialist what? Answers on a postcard, please. Genuine guesses allowed to, you can WhatsApp, of course, 03456060973, or you can text 84850 with genuine guesses. I don't want David in Birmingham looking it up and pretending that he's guessed correctly again. 23 after 10 is the time. NHS is under the microscope. Nikki is in Halifax. Nikki, which questions would you like to answer, and what would you like to say?
Well, I had a light bulb moment then when you just brought up that headline. I was going to guess green fingers.
That's a very good guess, but that's something that the NHS would probably be able to address, and B, that is not what Kim Jong-un's regime has got cross about with regard to Alan Titchmarsh. Alan Titchmarsh. So
yeah, or green finger, but let's not go there. I've called you in a while back. It was my first time, and it was on a very similar subject about NHS. Now, I've clocked up 30 years service this month, and I started back in the day.
Thank you.
No, you're very welcome. And I was what we used to call a nursing auxiliary back in the day.
Right.
So we're now what we call the healthcare assistants who give like the basic nursing care. Now, there's two elements that I kind of feel that has changed significantly. First of all, austerity. I qualified as a nurse 13 years ago, so this is obviously the period of when the Tories got into power, and I certainly saw a dissatisfaction from as a nurse, because we just feel that we're not able to be there for our patient. I certainly think from the general feeling we get, we want to do what we want to do, but our hands are tied in so many places sometimes. And secondly, role change, the shifting of roles. Now, when I started as a nursing auxiliary, we was doing the absolute basic elements of nursing care. You're washing, you're toileting, you're feeding, absolute basic minimums. We were allowed to check blood pressures. We were allowed to check patients' blood sugar levels using the finger prick. So that had shifted over the years, and now the healthcare assistants have taken on a lot of these roles.
But why would this have impacted on patient satisfaction?
I think because the patients probably feel that nobody's able to get to them and provide that quality care. It's not about the amount of things you can do for them in relation to giving them a medicine.
And this is presumably this is to save money, the things that you're describing, because the people who are on a lower wage are doing more of the stuff that used to be done by the people. But does it endanger patients? I mean, because none of us like change that much, but some change, when we look back, we can't believe we made such a fuss about it in the first place.
I wouldn't say in general it does. I guess it. I think the one thing that does endanger patients is the staffing levels. If you've not got enough staff on, you've not got enough people to be able to keep watch of the amount of patients you have in your area. The thing was that nurses used to do now what a lot of the doctors used to do when I first came into the NHS. So we're given more roles, but we've not got.
So this is a consequence of cuts or reductions in funding. The staffing is probably a more significant. Actually, not having enough bodies on the ground is probably more significant than what you describe. But briefly, Nikki, what does that do to your job satisfaction? Because part of me is thinking, I'm looking at Keith, and if we gave him some responsibilities, if we gave him some more responsibilities, if we let him do, 5 minutes of stand-up at the end of every show on Friday, he'd probably be glad he'd be glad if he was able to take up some of the roles that I currently fulfil. But did you not feel that way as a nurse? As an auxiliary?
I do go home some days feeling really downhearted. I mean, I've worked my way up the ranks to being an acute kidney injury nurse specialist now, and I do go down. I do go home feeling downhearted, knowing that if I've not been able to do what I want to do for my patients, I mean, I'm quite passionate in being able to.
Clearly.
And
that would be a big change since 2010, when patient satisfaction was... I mean, this is, in a way, you've done a better job than I have of explaining why I'm looking at this from your end of the telescope rather than the patient end of the telescope. Because if patient satisfaction is plummeting, then healthcare professional satisfaction will be plummeting as well, because you're in the job to... satisfy patients. That's the whole point. So, it would be a bit like me getting some feedback saying everybody hates the programme. That would, however much I thought I'd enjoyed myself that day, I would then find myself feeling a lot less fulfilled at the end of the programme than I would have done otherwise. Nikki, thank you. I'm not for a minute suggesting that what I do is anything like as important as you do. And it's a timely moment to remind you that at 12 o'clock today, we may be looking at a story about the most meaningless jobs and how many people think they've got a meaningless job. I'm going to change the way I do these things because we've got the WhatsApps now. So many people get in touch so quickly that I'm going to probably do them in short. So Dean suggests Alan Titchmarsh's Punnet of Plums has been censored in North Korea for its imperialist leanings. My favourite answer, but I'm getting too many to keep track of it, my favourite answer was stormtroopers. So this is the missing headline round. North Korean television censors Alan Titchmarsh's imperialist stormtroopers. I quite like that. But lots of you obviously knew the answer already, and you're all cheating. It's his jeans. Do you know why they've banned Alan Titchmarsh's? They've blurred out Alan Titchmarsh's denim jeans on North Korean television. It's not because they're too tight, no. It is because they are symbols of American imperialism. They've been pixelated to obscure the blue denim that he was wearing. Other things that are currently banned in North Korea for being signs or indeed symptoms of the decadent West include mullet haircuts, I don't know if you knew that, and nose piercings. So you live and learn. Sarah is in Battle in East Sussex, and we will talk to her after we get the very latest headlines from Thomas Watts. It is 10:34. Ben's been in touch. He says, all these messages, James, that you're reading out in real time, you're interacting with your audience. It's a bit like a Twitch streaming now. I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, but no one can accuse me of not being down with the kids. Back to the NHS and Sarah in Battle. An ex-GP, if I remember. Well, you might be an ex-GI as well, Sarah, but that would have been quite a career.
Yes. Hi. Yeah, so that's the answer to the third question. I spoke to you a few weeks ago about the fact that I'd left, but I'd had a 20-year career in NHS, and I'd spent 16 of those years being a full-time GP partner. Yes. So I think to understand from a general practice point of view why there is so much dissatisfaction is you have to understand the funding of general practice. And currently, general practice does 90% of the NHS work and receives just over 5% of the budget for NHS. On a daily basis, general practice currently is delivering 1.39 million appointments a day.
Good Lord.
And to put that into context, A&E is delivering 2 million appointments a month.
And so, how much has that changed in the window that we're looking through this morning?
So
roughly, I mean, you may not have the exact
increase in general practice productivity is an increase in about 19% since the pandemic. Everywhere else in the NHS is static in their delivery of their services. General practice is the only one that part of the NHS that has increased.
So this is the worst of all possible worlds. So if I am responding to this survey by saying I'm dissatisfied with the NHS, it is because I'm not seeing my GP as quickly or as regularly or as satisfactorily as I would like to, but the GP that I'm not seeing is actually working harder than ever before.
Exactly. So before the pandemic, we were seeing patients used to see their GP on average about 2 to 3 times a year. But now it is on average 7 times a year. you have to understand our funding. We only get funded £165 per patient per year.
Right. So that's incredible value for money. I see some right-wingers are going after the licence fee again today, which is also incredibly good value for money, but arguably your GP provision is even better.
So GPs, there are 2,000 fewer GPs than 2015. The population has increased by 6 million. We're probably short of about 6,000, 7,000 GPs in this country.
And that is it. I mean, in many ways, that's the closest we're going to get to a nutshell today. It's got a sort of Mr. Micawber level of logic to it, doesn't it? If you do not have enough GPs, which is, for most issues, the entry point, if you like, of NHS, apart, I suppose, from A&E, everyone else in a hospital has probably ended up there via a GP. If you don't have enough GPs, everything gets worse. Everything gets bottlenecked. Everything gets delayed. Everything gets diminished. It's extra. Can you play this game? Would you mind? If when you were in the job, if you'd done what the railway workers are doing, and this isn't a criticism of train drivers. It's there is less at stake, obviously, if you're driving a train than if you're running a doctor's surgery. What would happen if everybody in your old job suddenly started working to rule? Like literally only did work when the meter was running, only took all their breaks. So it would probably be more pertinent in a hospital, but I'm still interested to know what it would be like in a GP's practice.
No, in general practice, yeah. I was working 12 to 14 hours a day, every day, and barely went to the toilet once.
Yeah.
Because the intensity of which we are working, there's sort of an iceberg infographic that people only think that GPs just have 2 sessions, morning and afternoon, seeing patients, and that's all we do.
Yeah.
There is 101 other things that goes on in general practice that means that we do not stop doing what we're doing. So, and I would be only funded. My pay would only cover about 40 hours of my pay a week, and I was at. To keep things running, you have to do those 15, 20 hours each week extra, and all of us.
So you're doing 60 to 70 hours and being paid for 40, as it were?
Yeah.
So I wonder how many other people are doing that in an average week. It's extraordinary.
I would say most GPs are. I mean, the quote, part-time GPs that everyone keeps having a go at, they're actually doing probably 35, 40 hours a week, just as the part-time, because this is the level of work that we're having to carry. So everything would come to a standstill. I mean, what you have to understand is also an awful lot of what used to be done by secondary care, so in the hospitals, has now been passed into general practice. We are managing far more complex patients than we used to. The job has changed considerably into the things that we have to manage now. The funding has not flowed with it. So we are literally all the time, and obviously we can't say no because there's a patient in the middle.
That's why I draw the distinction between you and train drivers responsibly, because they can say no, and that's all I mean. I'm almost wishing that you did have the freedom that they have to exert, which is, pretty much the only thing that any worker has left when push really comes to shove, which is withdrawal of labour.
You have to understand how GP partners work. Why we are not striking fundamentally is because we are independent contractors with unlimited liability. So we would be breaking our contract if we went to strike. And obviously our salary GPs can't strike because they're employees. We are the employers, GP partners, and the employers of the salary GP, so they'd be striking against us. It's very complicated in general practice.
It's not that complicated. It's a mixture of goodwill and contract law that keeps the GP service afloat, even as it's in danger almost daily of buckling under the weight. Don't laugh at my next question. I promise it's my last one. Did anything in the course of your career in the NHS, did anything get better, particularly after 2010?
No.
Okay. It's not ideal, is it?
No.
Sarah, thank you. And then thank you for I was going to say thank you for your service, but that sounds like an American talking to a member of the military, but maybe that's not such a bad thing after all. I did begin by describing her as a GI. Sarah, thank you. I've mentioned how much fun we're having with WhatsApp, and this, I haven't got the hang of it yet because it moves too quickly for me to keep up with, but when we do a sort of hook and tease or whatever you call them, a missing headline round, I'm going to do it in the moment from now on, not build up the tension, because then I can see all the things coming in. But of course, it's not always funny. It's not always silly, the interaction element of the programme. Sometimes a message will appear on my screen that stops me absolutely in my tracks. and shakes me a little bit, I'm not going to lie to you. And this is one of them from Chris Milligan, who's written, "If only my wife had been able to work to rule, James. It was her job as an NHS GP that did this to her." And he's attached a newspaper article. And I will now give you a trigger warning and warn you that what follows is as bad as it gets. She disappeared from her surgery and took her own life in July of 2022. And with apologies for the provenance, Chris shares a link to the Daily Mail telling the story of his late wife, Gail, Dr. Gail Milligan, who, and as the Samaritans will tell you, and 116123 is the number you need for the Samaritans, such issues, such tragedies are never caused by one single factor, and it is unhelpful to suggest that they are, but the description of how much her job had changed, particularly during the pandemic, and her family's conviction that this was a crucial factor, an absolutely key factor in her decline. The unbearable pressure of her job finally got to her, is how Christopher put it on a Facebook message that later went viral. And Chris is obviously listening today from a slightly more profound perspective than the rest of us are. So my love to you and your family, mate. I'm so sorry for what you went through, but you're right to bring it to our attention. You're right to remind us of it, because you can leave or you can try to wind it down, although Sarah's just explained why that's almost impossible. Imagine turning on your radio and hearing some blowhard banging on about part-time GPs when you're already right up against it in your daily experiences, and dealing with the ignorance of professional pundits as well. It's just literally adding insult to injury. But on we go. Thank you. It is 10:43. Leah is in Godalming. Leah, what made you pick up the phone?
Hello. I'm so sorry. This is the first time I'm calling you, so I'm a little bit nervous.
Me.
So bear with me.
I will.
So the reason why I called is essentially I am an NHS doctor, and I've been working for the NHS for the last 12 years.
Okay.
And I think the dissatisfaction from patients is valid, but then at the same time, as a physician, I can't change that. I can't help it. It is something that should come, way above me to change the system.
Yes.
What I mean by that is, for instance, in terms of, I have been on nights for the last few days, working 13, 14 hours on call. It's me and two other colleagues, and we have about 30 to 40 patients to be seen overnight. So that is practically impossible for us to see all those patients within the 4 hours allocated. Some of them had to wait 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours. And obviously those patients would take it out on me and my colleagues as if I'm not working hard enough.
Tell me how would that manifest itself, that taking it out on you and your colleagues?
So they will come, they will scream at us, they will shout at us, they throw profanities, sometimes they are physical. It is very stressful. But then, when I am working 13, 14 hours with no break, no toilet break, no food break, and managing entire hospital with just two junior doctors, I don't have anything left in me to give. On top of that, radiology department might not work, IT system might fail, people may fall in sick. So we are working bare bones. And so it is difficult to give more.
Yeah.
And, and then you come home late. You had to do additional 2-3 hours after your shift is ended because you've been overwhelmed during the night. You feel anxious about missing important stuff about patients. Then you go through your patients, make sure that everything is done. So all those times are your time. Then you go home exhausted, especially if you have children and family, which I have. Makes it very difficult. My kids don't see me. My kids always say, "Mommy, you're not here," and it's difficult. And on top of that, when we strike, and I hear on the news or on the media saying, "Oh, those doctors are being greedy." Actually, I am not being greedy.
Not on this show, you don't.
Exactly. So more than half of my pay goes on childcare. I drop my child at 7 in the morning. I don't collect my child until 7 p.m. Simply because even if on my normal non-on-call shift, I'm meant to finish at 5, I don't finish at 5. I finish at 6, sometimes 7, simply because there are stuff to do. results to be looked at, letters to be written, and patients complain about letters not being sent on time. It's on and on and on and on. It's never ending.
You've described it incredibly well. I feel a bit crass asking you this, but what's out of all the things you've just listed, if I gave you magic powers to change one of them, only one of them, what would you change?
I think what I would change is probably the system in terms of how the NHS is funded and run. And I think doctors should be managing the trusts rather than managers who have zero clinical experience, because even when we talk about bank staff or locum staff,
yes,
I think the system is poor. Instead of giving your full-time staff a little bit incentive, a little bit better pay, yes, and a little bit appreciation, you let them strike over and over for 6 months, and yet each time they strike, you're paying thousands per single doctor to cover those.
It's extraordinary. Yes, so that's the political, if you like. What about the personal?
Exactly.
What about in your daily experience? If you could change one thing in the list of things that you've just not seeing your children, being abused by patients, right? Not having time to breathe. What paperwork? What single thing?
I think one thing as a person, I think a little bit of understanding and appreciation for my hard work, either from patients or from managers, would make a huge difference, because all of us, especially the ones who've left in the NHS, I had two more best friends through med school and early years. 2 of them are now in Australia. I'm the only one left here. And
there it is.
The people who are left behind, we're left behind because we believe in the NHS and the NHS ethos and what it stands for. So if I am here giving you what I can, just understand that I am giving you what every drop in me is given to you, to the patient being looked after and being well managed. And, if the patients and the management would understand that and actually give me a tiny bit of sympathy and understanding, would be incredible. To give you just a simple thing. It's the least you
can expect, really, but you're you're just not getting it. That's so beautifully put. I'm so sorry for what you have to endure. Right. I really am. And next time I'm in hospital, I don't think I'm part of the problem you've described, but goodness me, I shall keep your words in mind and go out of my way to express a little bit of gratitude and appreciation to the people that seem to get none whatsoever. And even if they get some, it's outweighed enormously by the abuse, insult and criticism that they receive. Leah, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for staying as well.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. And, of course, part of the problem here, and I make absolutely no apology for bringing this into it, although I do appreciate that if you fell for the lies of the last 14 years and you're still waving your little Boris Johnson flag or driving your Brexit bus, you're finding this now almost unbearable. You don't get the people walking into the hospitals, the people abusing Leah and her colleagues are the creations of the people who can't take responsibility for what's happened because they caused it, or if they're in my profession, they cheered it on. They cheered it. Attack the doctors. You attack the doctors if you're, for example, a radio presenter or a newspaper columnist. You attack the doctors when they go on strike. It's a bit like attacking teachers when they go on strike and then wondering why parents treat teachers with contempt. And then wondering why, after parents treat teachers with contempt at home, pupils start treating teachers with contempt at school. You open up your newspaper or you turn on your radio and there's someone giving it large to junior doctors. Someone who wouldn't say boo to a goose in an actual hospital, but, sitting in the safety of a studio like this, giving it large to the junior doctors. And then what do you think that a desperate, I'm not even going to say ignorant, I'm just going to say, what do you think a desperate patient is going to think that they have been empowered to do when they find themselves unhappy with the service that someone like Leah is providing, even though Leah is running on empty? What do you think's going to happen? It's 10:51. It's 10:55. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, and a few of you are asking me to turn a little bit of attention to the P. Diddy story and the fact that Prince Harry has been included in much of the coverage. But you already know that it's nonsense. If you're asking me to tell everybody else, but maybe some people don't realise that it's nonsense. So P. Diddy stands accused of various crimes. Sean Combs, as his given name, if you like. Puff Daddy, of course, previously. He's facing all sorts of allegations, and part of the deposition includes the claim that some of the alleged criminality was facilitated by the ability that he had to introduce others to famous people, and then it just makes a long list of famous people that he's met, which include, well, the list of famous people that he's met includes Princes William and Harry, because he attended, I think, a charity function at which they were both in attendance. But the deposition only mentions one of them, which, of course, gives people who only a couple of days ago were telling us how much more concern and care we should show towards members of the royal family after the Princess of Wales revelation regarding her own cancer, are exactly the same people who were telling us how much care and concern we should all show in such matters, have elected to completely ignore the reality and pretend that Harry is in some way implicated in the allegations against P. Diddy, to the point where the Sun newspaper has even printed a photograph of Harry with P. Diddy, from which they have cropped Prince William. They have used Photoshop, ironically enough. Well, they haven't even used Photoshop. They've used bloody scissors just to remove him from it in order to make it look as if or imply that there is some sort of complicity of the Duke of Sussex in the legal troubles facing P. Diddy, as I believe he is currently known. And that is the end of this week's TED Talk. Kirsten's in Aldershot to steer us back to the NHS. Kirsten, what have you got?
Hello. Hi.
Hello.
Hi. I just wanted to phone in, and I was listening was dropping my daughter off at college, and felt that I had to phone in. I don't phone in very often.
Okay.
Probably only the second time ever. But I'm a A&E sister in the NHS. Have been for 29 years this October in A&E, but over 30 years as a nurse.
Okay.
I guess there is no single thing, sadly. It's far more complex than that. It's years of underinvestment, but not just underinvestment, also really bad decisions being made about a huge number of things, really. If I was to put a single factor, I would say for us in A&E and for the hospital as a whole, it's probably sorting out the care sector, because for us, if we don't have flow, which is a term we use often, within the department, then everything grinds to a halt. Basically, we can't close the doors of A&E. People come in, they keep coming in, no matter how many staff we have on duty, no matter what little space we have to put them, they just keep coming. And no day is the same, but most days now we have very little space. There is very little room for manoeuvre at all. And obviously when the wards are full, then the patient ends up staying in A&E. And unfortunately, social care has a lot to answer for, not just...
Well, you mean the failure of social care provision? You're not. Yes. So just to clarify, if I may, when you say flow, you mean that the people passing through your care get stuck, where they should be going on to social care, or they should be being looked after at home, but they're getting stuck, and that causes problems. Well, everybody knows how log jams work, don't they?
Absolutely. There's a huge bottleneck. We can't move them to the wards because there are no beds to move them to. Because patients can't be discharged in a timely manner because there is nowhere to discharge them to. It takes a long time to sort out care homes or even home care, carers to come in and support them. It's also keeping them out of hospital in the first place.
Yes.
There are a number of initiatives going on around various hospitals and trusts around the country to actually keep patients out hospital at home. Cohesive care centres specifically set up for the elderly, like a one-stop shop, if you like, which has OT, physio, social workers, a pharmacist, everybody there to see the patient who has complex health needs to keep them out of hospital. And they provide a huge service. We need more of them.
It's bizarre. We're going to run out of time, but and you didn't ring in to be political, but I keep hearing calls for lower taxes and a smaller state, and everyone I speak to who's in charge of looking after British people tells me that we need more, not less.
We do need more, but it is. But I have to say, it isn't just Britain. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of countries are facing similar challenges. They just choose to blame it on Britain and blame it on the NHS.
Yeah.
The reality is that the private sector isn't doing much better in a lot of these countries. There are nurses in numerous countries around the world who are striking. Australia, France, Italy. They're all saying they don't have enough staff, they don't have enough
But you
funding.
know that, I mean, I'm sure you're right, but the number of nurses, doctors in particular, going to other countries from here, particularly Australia, is off the charts. And this 70% down to 24% in the space of 14 years, I think, albeit that there are plenty of other athletes on the track, Kirsten, I think that we are quite far in front. We
are indeed. I mean, some of my colleagues come from Portugal, and some of them have gone back to Portugal.
Yes, but that was the other element. That was the other element of the story that we haven't got around to talking about today. Was the exodus of foreign nurses from our NHS, which will make every single problem that you've heard detailed today by people at the actual coalface. It will make every single one of those problems worse. It has just gone 2 minutes after 11. In a sense, we're staying with matters medical in the next hour, I think, because I'm looking at a story about people regretting cosmetic surgery, and I'm wondering whether or not I am capable of getting that off the ground as a phone-in. Find out after this. 6 minutes after 11 is the time you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we turn our attention next. And would you believe, and you probably wouldn't believe this, but it is not the first time that we have ever had a conversation inspired by the former glamour model Katie Price, of course, previously known as Jordan. She's been on a podcast, one of my favourite podcasts actually, called How to Fail with Elizabeth Day. And she has encouraged young women to avoid plastic surgery. And this obviously is a field in which she knows of what she speaks. She wants to educate young women about how damaging plastic surgery can be to the body, adding that there was nothing worse than young women getting fillers in their early 20s. Now, this is such a weird subject in so many ways, because I'm not completely stupid. I know how completely normal it is in some circles. I think the signs are the inflated lips, aren't they? So I'm going to sound like either out of touch or unkind. Things that and who the hell cares what I think is attractive or not, but things that oddly I don't think are particularly attractive are considerably more commonplace than they ever were when I was younger. Botox is a little bit harder to spot, I think. You know, you see occasionally a woman on television, or a man, let's be absolutely clear about that, on television, who appears unable to do expressions, is the only way I can think of describing it. You would be hard pushed to know whether they were in a good mood or about to throttle you. Such is the static nature of their face, of their skin. And so that is Botox. Botox sort of paralyzes muscles, and it means that you don't have wrinkles. It just smooths everything out. But it also means that you can't move. You're probably thinking of people now that you've seen on television, and if you're even more unfamiliar with this world than I am, you are currently thinking, oh, that's what it is. I wondered what it... But so if you've seen someone on television and you thought, I'm sure they used to be able to smile, or I'm sure they used to frown a bit if it wasn't a very good act on the stage. And now you think you can't tell whether they're smiling or frowning. So that is what is going on there. That is Botox. Filler, I think, is... Well, I don't necessarily want to go on a crash course on what the various procedures are. But it is a little odd, isn't it, to hear Katie Price say... there's nothing worse than when these young girls now, and I will say in their early 20s, who are all getting fillers, all getting lips. So there's my first mistake. Fillers are different from lips. Are they? What's fillers is sort of cheeks, or fillers... Well, anyway, don't take it from me. Take it from Katie Price. She's been on the show, back in the day, a long, long time ago. All getting fillers, all getting lips, all getting the boobs. She says, I'm not a hypocrite, but I didn't start doing my face until I was in my 40s. Yes, I had a boob job, but I didn't even have fillers. I didn't have Botox till I was like 27, 28. Lips I tried, but they didn't know how to do it, and I looked like a duck. I think I remember that period of her career, but then I just relaxed on it. All the girls look the same now, and I think, what are they going to look like when they're my age? I say to my kids, oh, Mum, you're not doing surgery again, are you? They say that to me, and I'm like, oh, it's all right. They're so used to it, I think I've put them off for life. So I don't, on one level, know how serious a conversation this is. Because what you've got here is an older woman who's had a lot of cosmetic surgery and cosmetic enhancement, suggesting that you can start too young. And that seems to me to be relatively fair comment. I don't want to sound, I don't even want to sound like a pantomime misogynist. I have absolutely no right to tell a woman in her 20s whether or not she should have injections into her lips or her cheeks in pursuit of what she considers to be enhanced attractiveness. I mean, it is... I think there was a time when I'd have gone on a bit of a presumably a slightly tragic departure at this point and started being what I would have thought was funny, but was probably just rude. But you know what I'm talking about. We all have a reaction to what we see, and sometimes we don't know what we're seeing. So it's an entirely autonomous area for me, this. But it's not for her. It's not for Katie Price, because anything that becomes very popular very quickly is something that we need to keep an eye on. Just as a society, just as caring civilians, something that we need to keep an eye on. Anything that becomes very popular very quickly. And when somebody like Katie Price, who is almost a synonym, I think, for plastic surgery, when she warns against it, then I think we should probably pay a little bit of attention. And that's what we're going to do now. So you know what the most obvious question is? The most obvious question is, have you had plastic surgery, cosmetic surgery, whatever the correct phrase is, because I don't know if an injection counts as surgery. I don't know. But have you ever had an enhancement that you regret? And I'd really like to know why you regretted it, particularly if it went according to plan. If something went wrong, I can see why you would have regretted it. But if everything went perfectly, or at least everything went in exactly the way it was supposed to go, and you still wish you'd never done it, then I would like to talk to you. 0345 6060 973. I'm also interested in not wanting someone you love to do it. So I think it's more likely to be children, but it might be partners. You have a partner who is desperate to have, and the list that Katie Price provides is breast augmentation and fillers and lips, numerous cosmetic procedures, and you don't want the person that you love to have it. 0345 6060 973. I'd like you to tell me why not. Hopefully something a little bit beyond the, I just think you're beautiful as you are. Something a little bit beyond it. I really hope you'll meet me halfway on this one and we can have a really interesting conversation, because what I don't want to do is, oh, they all look ridiculous. And we could do that, but who does that help? Who does that help, really? If we just have a conversation about how silly or unattractive some people find these procedures. The point is this: some people regret it, and some people wish that younger people wouldn't do it, or some people wish that their own partners wouldn't do it. So that's really what I want you to address now. So have you had a procedure that you regretted? It's a really simple question, and it could be for any reason at all, but I think that if it went according to plan and you didn't like the results, or you look back, I'm not going to include tattoos. A couple of you are asking. I am enjoying the way that WhatsApp is speeding up the level and the speed of interactions that we have, although that was actually a text to 84850. No, tattoos don't count today. They fit, I think, into a different category. We can agree about that, can't we? A tattoo is a very different thing. You think a tattoo is beautiful, and often you're right, but you still may regret it. But this is a very different thing. This is what you're presenting as your body to the world. It's not an adornment, it's an enhancement. It's something that you think improves. It's like the difference, I don't know what it's like. I was about to say it's like the difference between decorating and putting a picture on the wall, but I don't think that quite... Does that work as an analogy? It's the difference between decorating the room and putting a picture on the wall. The difference between cosmetic surgery, having an extension done, and or doing the Banksy thing with the green paint. No, stop it. It's a serious question. Katie Price has said that she wants to educate young women about how damaging plastic surgery can be to the body, adding that there's nothing worse than young women getting fillers in their early 20s. So I just want your thoughts on this, ideally with a personal experience. So you had it done. And hey, look, we must also include didn't have it done, which means I want young people in their 20s who have had the kind of procedures that Katie Price is referring to and completely reject the idea that they shouldn't have done. Let's not be mean about her. She puts up with quite enough already as it is. But so we'll leave out the hypocrisy and who's she to say this. So you're in your 20s, you have fillers, you have injections, you have enhanced, whatever it may be. Perhaps you've even had a boob job in your 20s at a young age and you're absolutely delighted. So I want the whole gamut. I want the people who recognise what she's saying, we regret it, and I also want people, ideally young people in their 20s, who are doing it right now with no regrets whatsoever. Because I'd like to know why. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. And I don't know why Kenneth and Mohammed and a couple of others are raising the subjects of hair transplants for men. Why on earth would that have popped into anybody's mind while listening to this programme? But in order to answer, I'll answer your questions in the course of the next hour because I'm more interested in what you have to say first. And what I want you to tell me is why you regret it, or if you are younger, if you're in the category that Katie Price is talking about, why you don't. It's 11:16. It is 19 minutes after 11, and it is, I think, probably more a conversation about people in their 20s getting stuff like fillers, and the suggestion from Katie Price, who is something of a patron saint of this practice, that they really shouldn't. I mean, the medical side of it, she claims it's damaging to your body, although I don't know who's more qualified to comment on that, the people providing the procedures or the people receiving them. But the why of it, this is where I was tying myself in knots a moment ago. It's the why of it. And does it work? You get it done not because you think it will make you look, here we are, not because you think it will make you look better. I know that sounds weird, but you get it done because you think it will make you feel better. And that's the thing that we can't know. I can't know whether it's made you feel better. And it doesn't matter whether or not I think it's made you look better or not, because who cares? It's certainly not me you're trying to impress or attract. It may not be anybody that you're trying not to impress or attract. You got it done because you thought it would make you feel better about yourself, I presume. And that's what I want to know. I want to know whether it works or not. 0345 6060973. So everyone who's had it done, whatever the procedure may be, whether it's a relatively low-level one, like having the injections into your lips that I think, and I'm no expert, but I think I encounter a lot more regularly now than I used to do, or whether it is the Botox that freezes your facial expression somewhat, which I know friends of mine have done and are, I think, delighted with it, because it slows the aging process, which again is a reason why you'd get it done in your 40s but not in your 20s. But does it make you feel better? Because that adds to Katie Price's theory, doesn't it? If you're having it done in your 40s because you are visibly aging and it works, then there it is. You would no doubt be delighted that you've done it because it visibly works and you don't look as old as, I presume you would at least. Or if you're having it done in your 20s, what are you having it done for? So that's what I want you to answer. 0345 6060973. The producer who's in her 20s increasingly encountering people of her generation who are getting Botox, which doesn't make sense to me in my 50s because you don't really start aging until you're in your mid-30s. If you're lucky, give or take. So that's what I want to know. You do it to make yourself feel better. Did it work? Hit the numbers now. You will get through. Valerie's in Southwark. Valerie, what made you pick up the phone?
Oh, hi.
Hello.
Yes. I heard the tail end of what you were just saying because I was on hold on my phone. First time caller, be nice.
Of course I will. I think this is one of those subjects where I have to be, isn't it, really?
Yeah, absolutely. And I had breast implants put in after I had my child because my body changed. And I did think at the time it was to make myself look a different way, look better. But you're quite right. I thought it was going to make me feel better, which it didn't, because the way we feel better ourselves is an inside job mentally, not physically.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I'm not going to argue with you about your own personal experience, but I mean, in terms of being healthy and fit, when we catch ourselves looking better than we did before we started exercising or before we started eating a bit more healthily, it's a satisfying moment to catch ourselves looking better, isn't it?
Well, I have to say from the get-go, and this isn't really explained,
yes,
when you go for surgery, is that I have many women I know have had surgery done. You never end up having just one pair of implants and then everything is okay.
Right.
I had problems in my first set of implants, right?
Okay.
And I'd probably, to be fair, if the surgeon had explained all this to me, I probably wouldn't have listened, because when you make a decision to do something like that,
yes,
you've made the decision. And I very unfortunately got breast cancer 8 years ago with having my implants in,
right,
which caused me a huge amount of problem while I was having my treatment for breast cancer. So again, it just wasn't worth it. And then last year, I had continued problems because one of my left breasts had encapsulated from the radiotherapy, which I then had to go back into hospital and have the implants removed. And what has happened since in the last year, the problem still hasn't resolved itself. And it is, and I have to be honest with myself, is because I made that decision all that time ago to have implants put in.
And that's made everything worse.
When I had my implants taken out last year, I asked the surgeon, I want to take them home with me. I have a 25-year-old daughter. Not that she wanted at the time. She was considering it.
Really?
But I wanted to show her the way they come out the body, how disgusting it is.
How do you mean?
And
what mean?
One of them had split. They looked like goo. I mean, it was revolting. It was absolutely revolting when I saw them in a plastic bag, and I thought that was the decision I made because I thought that would make me feel better.
Why did you think it would make you feel better?
Because I was at the time too concerned about how I look. I work in the health and wellness business, so I'm in training clothes all the time. Yeah. So when I saw my body, and also, you know, I thought maybe my partner, who I was with at the time, wouldn't find me attractive anymore.
Right.
Because my body had changed. And I'm telling you, a lot of women who have children have these insecurities.
Of course. Did you ask your partner?
You have a child.
What was your partner's attitude when you told them that you were planning it?
Well, he agreed to it because he said, if that's going to make you feel better.
Right.
Because there was nothing that he said that would make me feel better at the time.
Oh.
You know, and, you know, I think we need to consider the health consequences of making these decisions.
That's what Katie Price is talking about.
Exactly.
I don't think her experiences has been quite as traumatic as yours, but the bottom line is that you're putting something into your body, something quite significant into your body that isn't really supposed to be there, aren't you?
Absolutely. And 1 in 3 women who have implants put in, their body rejects them. Now, that's something that you're not told.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, it is.
Was there no moment?
You have a much higher risk of getting breast cancer. In the last
again,
3 years,
I'm not qualified to. I mean, neither of us are oncologists, but and we'll double check on some of the research. But I'm more interested in your very personal experience. Was there no moment of satisfaction? Did you think you'd done it, made a mistake pretty much from the minute that you came around from the anaesthetic, or the minute that the bandages were taken off?
Well, the thing that happened when I had I totally regretted it because
straight away,
straight away, I had a problem with my first implants.
Okay.
They were really uncomfortable from the get-go.
Right.
And my body was rejecting those from the get-go, so I had to have them taken out. And then by this point, I'd split up with this person, my partner.
Yeah.
So I was even feeling worse about myself.
Of course.
And thought, what man is going to fancy me if my breasts look like this? You know, so my self-esteem was going lower and lower and lower. And again, I should have put myself in therapy, not in the hands of another plastic surgeon. That's what I should have done.
Yes.
And that was, you know, but we make mistakes.
We do. We all make mistakes, but these are some of them are easier to reverse than others.
Absolutely.
Can I ask if your 25-year-old daughter told you that she wanted fillers or wanted her lips doing? Would you be cool with that?
No, absolutely not.
Really?
No. I want her, because I have since done a lot of work on myself.
Yes.
I have put myself through therapy.
Right.
I've gone through the issues that made me feel like that I thought that fixing myself on the outside, and very sadly, I believe that I'm for Katie Price,
Yes.
who consistently has more and more surgery.
Yes.
Right? She's deeply unhappy. There's stuff there that she needs to be dealing with a psychotherapist, not just doing more and more and more surgery, thinking that this is going to make her feel better. It's clearly not. It's not working. And it actually doesn't work. As I said,
well, some people listening to this will disagree with you, won't they? Some people will be pleased with what they've done.
Of course.
But I guess it depends why you're going into it. So if you now, post-therapy, thought, oh, I'd quite like to get my lips done, or I'd quite like to, you'd be doing it for very different reasons. I think that boobs are such a big deal, aren't they, Valerie? That's the thing, because you're trying to, in both cases, you're trying to slow the effects of aging, but I think it's like a gradient. So if you're trying to slow the effects of aging by just freezing some of your facial muscles, it's very different to having some bags of jelly stuck in your chest, I think.
But you know what? Wait till we find out what later on in 10, 20 years' time, what fillers and Botox can do to your health.
Well, that might be part of what Katie Price is alluding to as well, because that's what I meant by when something becomes very popular very quickly. We all have a responsibility to at least keep an eye on things. But Valerie, thank you, and I'm glad you're clearly in a much better place now. In fact, the astuteness of your self-analysis is extraordinary, to be able to say that I went into it thinking it would make me feel better, but how can it make me feel better? It might, even if it went brilliantly, you might feel better in a way when you catch your reflection in the mirror, but whatever it was that pushed you to the point where you thought that having that done would change something within you psychologically, I don't know that anyone's going to be able to tell me they truly feel that they were psychologically changed. I got it done for me, and it didn't make me feel better. It wasn't about looking young or beautiful, so I just didn't want to frown at my face when looking in the mirror. I wasn't looking like me before the Botox. I was absolutely fine with my face until my 40s. I do think it's very sad that people in their 20s, writes Laurie, are having all this work done because of media, social media influences, etc. They'll never be satisfied, and also fashion images change all the time. One day it's a big bum, the next it's big lips. Where will it stop? I really do worry about them. What's it like to be the parent of someone who you consider to be in the first flush of youth? Like, genuinely. They are. You look at them and you think, God, I wish I was that age again. And yet they're thinking, oh, I just want to tweak this. And how do you have that conversation? How does that unfold? And listen, by all means, I'd hate Valerie's comments to go unchallenged, actually. I'd hate the impression to be that everybody who has this sort of thing done comes away and regrets it. Surely there are people who are absolutely delighted that they had it done, whatever it may be. And if they had their time again, they'd probably have done it even quicker. 11:30 is the time. The number you need is 0345 6060 973. Thomas Watts has your headlines. I am going to include hair transplants. I didn't mean to exclude them, but I obviously it's something that I would benefit from, but haven't really had any particular desire to undergo. Some of your messages make me wonder whether I should have done though. This one, I've had 2 hair transplants, James, and my life has improved immeasurably. The pain of the operation is unbelievable. Right, I'm out. There you go. That didn't last very long, did it? The pain of the operation is unbelievable. So there's a sort of equation there between the pleasure you think you'll get from not... And listen, the only time I notice it is when I see my clips. And I don't really watch my clips. But no, I don't. But sometimes they're obviously on in front of me. Or sometimes I accidentally, a bit like with Nell and I going on holiday, I accidentally find myself watching my own clips. And my hair's at a terrible point, a terrible stage at the moment, because I can't go one way or the other. It's too soon to shave it all off. But if I keep it vaguely long and well trimmed, why have you put the camera on? Did you do that? Did you put the pictures on in the studio? Gee, it looks like I'm trying to effect some sort of comb over. Do you know, I don't know if I should tell you this. Shall I tell you this? I can't tell you. All right, I'll tell you. So, you know Alexander Armstrong off Pointless? So he presents this slot. So he won't be able to hear this unless he's in the lavatory. He'll be on Classic FM, which is just up there, like 3 studios up. He's got beautiful hair. But he's also got a bald patch about the size of mine. But somehow, he's just got like a... So the thing I'm thinking of doing, I was actually thinking about it this morning. I was going to ask him who his hairdresser is. I really like my hairdresser. But I just don't know whether he's just got a lucky head. So he's got a bald patch, but it's proper skin. It's like a tonsure, like a medieval monk. Do you know what I mean? Like Friar Tuck. He's got a Friar Tuck bald patch. And then he's got nice, tight, sort of curly hair around the bald patch. Mine's not like that. And I don't know whether that's because I'm doing something wrong or whether it's a sort of yet another genetic misfortune. So I'm literally thinking, I don't see him all the time. I literally think I might have a little word with him and see what it is. Does his hairdresser do something? Because he's on telly a lot, obviously, which is no longer a consideration for me and highly unlikely ever to become one again. But if it did, I'd probably have to do something about it. The last time I had a big job on telly, did I tell you what they did to me? The last time I had a big job on telly, they used like iron filer, like because I've got strands. So you can tell by the way that I'm talking that I'm a lot more interested in this subject than I pretend to be, can't you? You can tell that I'm engaged in it. What I'd like is a nice-looking bald patch. But in the absence of that, we'll include hair transplants. Anyone have a hair transplant? Love it. Or really, really regret it. Let's go to Anne, who's in Liverpool, on the broader question of cosmetic intervention. That's the phrase I was looking for, Anne. Cosmetic interventions. What would you like to say?
Hi, James. Firstly, on your hair, my mum would tell you grass doesn't grow on a busy street.
I love your mum already. That's fantastic. You're not with us wrong
anymore, but that's what she'd have said.
Oh, bless her memory. Thank you for that.
I've got two perspectives here. Firstly, I've got a 26-year-old daughter, and secondly, I've worked in this industry. And there's a couple of things that I think we need to really kind of fact check. The first one being dermal fillers are used for facial contouring predominantly. Right. So they can be used in the cheeks, the chin, the jawline, the lips. You can have it in your décollage, the backs of your hands, because it is predominantly hyaluronan, hyaluronic acid in a solution, and it can be injected very, very well. Okay. And it can look very, very natural.
So what do you? I mean, this is a crash course for me. So you would look at yourself in the mirror, and what would you see that made you think I might get a filler? I might get. So
some people have very, very thin lips.
Oh yeah, okay.
It's fashionable at the moment to have bigger lips. You've got lines that go from your nose to the corners of your mouth called your nasolabial lines. And as you get older, they get deeper. So you can have a little bit of filler run through there and it plumps them out and the lines look less prominent. Okay. You can have cheek fillers, so if you want more prominent cheekbones. And jawline's very popular with men if you want a more squared jawline.
Are you serious?
There's lots of reasons. Absolutely.
So where does it go then on the jaw?
So it literally goes into your mandible, into your bottom, into the skin
into
around
your
bottom jaw, your mandible, your bottom jaw. So, but it basically you can contour, you can make it more square by adding filler. It's basically like if you think about putting plasticine on a jawline in a sort of angle, you can very, very easily with a really good clinician have it done. Okay. Now a couple of big things here I've got, and Botox is different. Botox teaches muscles how to behave. Right. So basically with Botox, you've got elevator muscles which go up and depressor muscles which come down. So if you're a frowner, you want those muscles to stop behaving. So you basically knock them out. So Botox is fairly innocuous, if I'm honest. And it's not too big a deal. But filler is a big, big deal. And there's a couple of big issues here. The first one being, by law, the only people that can deliver Botox, fillers and any other facial enhancements, injectables, are healthcare professionals who are on a register.
Okay, yes.
We now have a Wild West in this country where you could go on a one-day course in Manchester for £1,000 and then tomorrow open up a clinic and start delivering Botox and fillers.
Really?
Absolutely. Okay. Because the only thing that's going to happen to you if you get caught is you're going to get a slap on the wrist. And
so be careful. Be very, very careful. And also, I guess from our purposes today, don't let stories born of the dysregulation you describe put you off the whole practice.
Absolutely. So choose your injector really, really carefully. Okay. Do your background on whoever you're going to have it done. And think really long and hard, but also the product. You know, there's a couple of big companies out there that do fantastic products, but you could also go on eBay and buy dermal filler, believe it or not. Good and it's Lord. Outrageous, James, exactly. The second thing I want to say, I've got a 26-year-old daughter. Yeah. Who is absolutely breathtakingly stunning. She's absolutely beautiful. And yet
I've never heard a mum say that about her own daughter before.
Oh my God, she's gorgeous. But she finds fault with her face constantly. And part of this is to do with social media and filters. And these kids have grown up with an unrealistic expectation of what they think they should look like. So these filters blur out the lines, they plump up your lips. And
but at 25, there aren't any lines.
Well, but again, James,
26.
They spend an awful lot of time on their phone, taking selfies in the mirror. Yeah. And she'll say to me, Mum, I think I'm getting a bit of a crease here. Now, needless to say, at that age, all I encourage is really good skincare. You know, you make sure you're getting your vitamins in, you put sunscreen on. But it is a real big cultural shift. Because these girls, and it's the same
I'm
with
behind the curve. I'm hugely behind the curve.
Your girls are younger, aren't they?
They are, but they're not even.
To get a grip.
Maybe, and maybe they'll swerve it. You just don't know, do you? Just cross your fingers. But I do recognise what you describe when you talk about the pouting for selfies and the constant. I mean, you see it everywhere, don't you? People taking pictures of themselves and pulling quite odd faces, but all quite similar faces. And
it's these influences, and you know, I think the other thing is when I was a clinician, when I was delivering these things, I would say now, if somebody came into me and I could tell they'd had filler in, say, the last 3 months, because the other thing that these people do is they go from, you know, they go clinic to clinic to clinic because they want more filler. And this is another thing. They get maybe a mil in their lips and they love it and they think, well, I could just go a little bit more, so they want another mil. It's not natural. There's a ratio called the golden ratio of how your lips are supposed to look.
Yes, I'm familiar with that.
Your top lip. I've seen that. And, you know, it is just, unfortunately, a cultural shift.
So are you trying to talk your daughter out of it? Or has
she hasn't had anything.
No, but do you have to talk? Do you have to tell it? Would she, if she had a different mum, do you think she would have done? Or you?
I think she's very self-critical, and I think this is another thing that this generation of young women,
don't think they look nice.
She's doing a master's degree. She's a staunch socialist. She's a fantastic young woman.
Yeah.
But her image is really important to her.
Sure.
And I think this comes from everything is visible. You know, everything is kind of image-based. And whereas when we were kids, I wanted Doc Martens because I thought they were cool. Yeah. These girls want lips and lashes, and it's also, you know, a booming industry. These pharmaceutical companies are absolutely thriving because
they certainly are.
It's classed as non-surgical, you know.
So what I'm struck by listening to you, and you're going to be, I imagine, the best qualified contributor to the conversation, for which I'm so grateful. But what I guess there are two types of patient, for want of a better word. And there's the patient who will never be happy, which I think is what Katie Price speaks to. And it's what an earlier caller used her as an example, Valerie used her as an example of. But then there are patients who will be happy, who are the ones that you started talking about. And that is going to have something to do with age. Because if you're doing this at 25, 26, I suspect you're much, much more likely to be in the never going to be happy with the results category, because you'll just find something else to be unhappy with. But if you're doing it at 45, 46, or even, I don't know, off the top of my head, 52, and you're doing it almost to stop, to pause time or to turn back time rather than to pursue perfection, you're more likely to be happy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the big thing for someone like me, I'm 50. I was 50 last summer. You're right, James. I don't look it. I was 50 last summer.
Good genes, isn't it, Anne?
For someone like me, I would want to look well. Yes. I don't want someone to say, "Where did you get your lips done?" I want someone to say, "You look really well." And that's the difference. I think a tweak, a little bit of something to maybe enhance is a really good thing. And I think the other side of it is it's every individual's choice.
Well, I am trying really hard to stress that. But it's not, is it? Because you and I would try and talk our 20-something daughters out of it. We both would, wouldn't we?
Yeah. But I also think the other side of this is you then get into the realms of things like body dysmorphia.
Yeah, of course.
And that's frightening. And this is why I think there needs to be far more regulation.
Clearly. I'm a big fan of regulation. I'm the anti-Rees-Mogg when it comes to regulation. Regulation needs to be a synonym for protection, public protection. Red tape protects the public. People who don't want regulation want less protections of the public. I hate to cite this because it's such a grisly totem, but when you have insufficient regulation, things like Grenfell Tower happen, and that can happen on a personal level as well as a public level. And what an amazing call. Thank you so much. And you've introduced me to all three female generations of your family there. Your late mother, you, and your daughter as well.
She was the best.
Well, clearly. What a treat. Thank you. It's 11:46. It's 11:51. A lot of love for Anne coming in. Pete puts it best in Newcastle. He says, combine Scouse humour with high levels of expertise and you get the best caller I've probably heard for a very long time, James. Grass doesn't grow on busy roads. Genius. I'm having that. In fact, I've changed my mind now. I'm no longer thinking about having a hair transplant. I won't get my jaw done. Do you think that would cause unbelievable pain as well? And just to be absolutely clear, this is from Leanna. I'm not now speaking from my own personal experience. Leanna writes, I'm so grateful for my nose and boob job. I've had filler and Botox as well. I've kept it natural looking. And I feel it's really important to me not to disclose to anyone the work I've had done. It's mine and it's private, and it's made me feel infinitely more confident in my attractiveness. I'm so glad you were listening today. I needed that perspective. No one's actually rung in with it. I don't know what that means psychologically, I certainly wouldn't want to arrive at the conclusion that most people regret it, because I suspect most people don't, but I wonder whether most people don't actually like to talk about it. I remember when a young woman at university had her boobs done and told absolutely everybody. And it was odd, but she was absolutely over the moon with the results and couldn't. I guess you couldn't get away with it. If I had a hair transplant now, I couldn't just come to work tomorrow. So anyway, so there we were. So go 345 and you're watching the clip back and you go, that's a bit odd. Something's changed about James. So you send me a WhatsApp to 034560609. Say, James, have you had a hair transplant? No, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean about, do I look like the kind of person that would have hair? So maybe you don't, unless you're having the... So we only notice the really visible stuff. So we really only notice there was a terrible phase, trout pout, that did the rounds a while ago. You're going to notice that, and you probably notice if you were living with someone. But even if you might... So the really good stuff is the stuff that is almost like turning you into soft focus, just slightly softening... Anyway, it's been an education. Alex is in Aldershot. Alex, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I'm a dentist, and I just wanted to say one thing about the fillers and Botox that would be worth for people to consider if they want to have treatments like that done.
Yes.
Is that when we put Botox in a muscle, obviously the muscle will get paralyzed. When we don't use a muscle, that muscle shrinks.
Yes.
When the muscle shrinks, we have to then use fillers to fill the space of the muscle.
Oh, Lordy.
And then once we use fillers, then we need to have a discussion with the doctor. What if I change my mind? How easy is this to reverse? How will my skin respond to not using it? Is it going to go back to the way it was? What is my skin type? Also, I would definitely consider
That's really
an advice. And then, of course, it can help, but just ask those questions. Know your skin type, know your connective tissue. And also, if you want to get treatments like that, of course, it's very important to sleep, because none of those things matter if we don't sleep enough. It's a very vital part of our health and skin's health.
I took an unexpected turn there. I'm not disputing what you're saying. Sleeping is wonderful and very, very important. But yeah, and yes, and in fact, I think there's a story in the newspaper today about the impact that poor sleep can have upon the aging process itself. So to be clear, you administer Botox for dental reasons or for cosmetic reasons?
I've been on the course, but I personally I chose not to right now anyway.
So you could do it, but you don't ever need Botox in order to have your teeth treated, do you? Unless I've missed the point a bit.
Well, there are indications where you could potentially get Botox, so it helps with grinding or with the very, very strong...
that's what I'm asking. No, it never occurred to me. So that's what you learnt on the course, is what you're telling me now, but you haven't actually gone down the path of administering it yourself. Can I ask you a slightly odd question? I'm just thinking about what you said about the filler becoming almost like a sort of, literally a filler. So your muscles shrink because of the Botox, and then you have to fill it up with filler. When you see some famous people on the telly, and they... can I put this delicately?
You can see.
Their faces seem to have grown. They don't. It's not just that they've become less wrinkled or less expressive, but their faces seem to have become a bit too big for their shoulders sometimes. Is that likely to be a consequence of what you're describing?
I think so. I mean, honestly, I would know more about this if I was a practitioner doing this kind of thing.
Of course.
But based on my understanding and my
professional but with my limited experience, I say, yes, it can lead to such things. We may look different. We may not have wrinkles, but we will look different. And you know what? Certain facial features, I think, respond to these kind of things better. And certain connective tissues. For me personally, and I'm a mom,
yeah.
I mean, in theory, it'd be great. But I choose not to. I barely recognize myself on pictures. I don't want pictures right now. But I personally, and we are all different, I don't want it.
Yes.
But it's just ask those questions. What if I change my mind? What if I want to do this treatment for decades? What should I expect?
Well, I'm glad you were listening today, and that's a really helpful contribution, because I think that we've managed to conduct this entire conversation in a way that doesn't, I hope, sound
I'm
judgmental.
So sorry to interrupt.
What?
Sugar, as a dentist, also, but sugar attacks our connective tissue. So also important to quit all,
So the less sugar you eat, the tighter your skin will remain?
Well, look, the less sugar you eat, the healthier you are.
The better you are anyway. I've just got one of those apps that tells you put the barcode on the app, Alex, and it tells you where all the sugar... What do you think's got more sugar in it, a date or a fig?
Oh, gosh. Date.
Wrong. Oh, no, right, sorry. Yeah, 7 times. Right? How much... This is the most Alan Partridge thing I've ever done. How much more sugar in 100 grams of dates than that? Well, or in 100 grams of dates than in 100 grams of figs? Have a guess.
Well, you tell me.
No, you tell me. You're the dentist.
Well, I can because I'm on the A3 and I'm getting a bit nervous.
Okay, no, fair enough. Fair enough. You crack on. Shall I do a hook and tease on that? How much more sugar is there in the date than a fig? I just did it this morning. I've got this new thing. They're dried dates, and dates are always dried, aren't they? I don't. Anyway, don't at me. It's about 6.5 times more sugar in a dried date than there is in a dried fig. 6? Yeah, I know. Isn't that incredible? Jeff's in Munich. Jeff, it's all gone a bit weird. Thank goodness you're here. What would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, James.
Hello, Jeff.
Yeah, you did ask about hair transplants, didn't you?
Yeah. What of it?
I had one in 2008.
How did it go?
Back then, when it was a very dodgy thing to do, because it could go very badly
as in
wrong.
As in new technology, not as in sort of, dodgy as in risky.
Yeah, you could end up with cornrows, or you could end up, with everything going
looking like
wrong.
Little plugs on. So what happened? How did you get on?
Well, I spent a year doing research on online forums, on pages of people looking for a doctor that was recommended.
Right.
And finally, I found one in Canada.
Good Lord.
He was called the Hairline King, and he had the best reputation of anybody I looked at.
And and were you happy?
9,000 euros.
How much? I'm going to run out of time. How much did you spend?
9,000 euros.
And how happy are you now?
Well, it's an awful operation, but
yes.
It takes a year for it all to grow back, but it was absolutely a perfect result.
And still 16 years later, you're still, it's still there? Does it all fall out again? Are you still happy?
Well, it thins out, but, after 16 years, it's still fine. But I would advise your listeners, don't go to cheap people.
No, never go to cheap people. No, I know, that's great advice. I'm glossing up, I'm hurrying up only because I'm glancing at the clock for once and noting what the time is. But so it thins out again. Actually, is Jeff still there? On a scale of 1 to 10, how painful is it?
It is very painful. Your whole frontal area is numb 10? For a year, and it's red.
What's is it the most painful thing you've ever done as a man? Because we're never going to give birth.
Oh yeah, you look awful. You look like a
pain,
chicken.
Physical pain during the. How is it the worst thing that's ever happened to you?
No, the worst thing I had was a slip disc.
Okay, right. So it's not as bad. There you go. I'll put that on the advert. Not as painful as a slip disc. I still think the jaw. Do you think the jaw? I think I grew a beard because I didn't like my jawline, but it's so long ago I can't remember. In the next hour, meaningless jobs, ironically enough, given the state of this programme over the last 20 minutes. It's 3 minutes after 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we turn our attention next to a completely different story. We touched on this once before. I've just remembered, and I embarrassed myself, or rather someone embarrassed me, on social media. So there's a rather brilliant philosopher, he may no longer be with us, I'm not sure, called David Graeber, a sort of philosopher of 21st century socialism. And he has talked, I think he's written an entire book about pointless jobs or meaningless jobs. And he sort of means, in a political or philosophical sense, the kind of jobs that a society invents to keep people busy, to keep middle class. I may even be getting it wrong now because I hadn't read it at the time, and all I read was a column in the Times which had completely misunderstood. I won't tell you who wrote it because I misunderstood it as well. But I read a column in the Times that had completely misunderstood David Graeber's work. I used the column in the Times as a launch pad for a phone-in about pointless jobs. And I can't remember who it was, but it was someone on a newspaper. It must have been The Guardian or The Eye, because it was a full-on Corbynista who we put the clip up of me talking about it, and they came for me like it was like flipping beagles after a fox. It was extra. He doesn't know his David Graeber, and then all the other. So crikey. So I took it down. I thought, well, if I've got it wrong, I better take it down. There's no point leaving it up if I'm actually wrong. So today we're talking about a YouGov poll that I've got in front of me. I am not relying upon a second-hand, mistaken analysis of the work of David Graeber in the field of pointless jobs. I just want to get that out there front and centre. 1/3 of Britons say their job is not making a meaningful contribution to the world. Right, stop right now. If you're in work, this will be a little bit easier. If you're not currently in work, then think back to what your last job was, or jobs before that. How many people could really say that their job makes a meaningful contribution to the world? I'm going to ask the opposite question, by the way, because I don't know that we want a long list of people describing the meaningful contribution they make. I'll go first. I think I make the world a happier place by coming on the road. There's certainly less hate in the world as a consequence of me explaining to people how the organs of right-wing media and right-wing politics work to encourage us to blame the undeserving targets for the state of our own lives or the state of the country. And you know, I'm blessed recently to have been out touring the book, and people come and say lovely. Do you see, if we did a phone-in about that, it'd be awful. Mate, if I carried on for much longer, it would be awful. Some of the letters I get that thank me for... Do you see? I say I do a meaningful... Give me a ring and tell me how meaningful your job is. Yeah, hi. I've got a meaningful job. What's your meaningful job? Well, James, I've got a really meaningful job. I do hair transplants for... No, so we're not doing it from... I just think most of us probably... possibly as a consequence of modesty, which is not something I know a lot about. But modesty may be partly a consequence of people saying that they do a meaningless job. 1/3 of Britons say their job is not making a meaningful contribution to the world. What sectors do you think are most likely to say that they don't make a meaningful contribution to the world? One surprise, actually, they both surprise me, but for completely different reasons. I'll give you a clue. I've worked in, well, it's not much of a clue unless you pay a little bit more attention to this programme than is probably healthy. But I've worked in one of these sectors, and it's not the media, which narrows it down quite a lot, actually, if you have been paying attention. So the two sectors that report the highest incidence of people saying their jobs don't make a meaningful contribution to the world. What do you think those two sectors are? Actually, let's do the WhatsApp. See if you can guess. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Thank you to everybody who's let me know that David Graeber did indeed pass away a few years ago. I really can recommend his books, The Dawn of Everything, which he co-wrote with David Wengrow, being particularly impressive, as Adrian reminds us. So what sectors do you think are most likely? So in the first hour, we talked to people who worked in the NHS, right? I think you'd be bonkers if you worked for the NHS and didn't think you made a meaningful contribution to the world. I also think that unless you were a surgeon, unless you were like right at the top of the tree, where quite odd pathologies kick in, like Master of the Universe type psychology, I think you'd be very unlikely to ring me and tell me that you make a meaningful contribution to the world. So I've opened it up now, and I'm going to try, like I said, to try and do things a bit more speedier. So John says, is it hospitality and services? No. Michael Toohey says, is it shoe sellers? Is that, well, it is. Yeah, Dan Wallace as well has got it right. Lewis has got it wrong. It's not hospitality. Abe says, is it Minister for Brexit Opportunities or Minister for Common Sense? Well played. We've got a winner already at this stage. Shop assistant. No, publicans. You're joking. I don't think any publican on the planet would think that they didn't make a meaningful difference to the world. So yeah, loads of you are going for retail. None of you are going for the other one, which kind of proves my point. Retail and customer services. Retail. Is it retail? It must be retail. I don't think we have lift attendants anymore. Jane, to be honest with you, unless you're in an extremely posh place. And then one person, I don't know whether from personal experience or not, suggested insurance. Right, hold your horses. Stop sending them in now, because I get bombarded. Do we keep a number on them, Keith? Do we get a tally? Are we just breaking all sorts of records at the moment by using WhatsApp in such a constructive and creative way? It's making my job more meaningful by the minute. So I can see why you think that about retail. I would disagree. I know this sounds odd, but if you kit someone out in a beautiful suit, I suppose it depends what kind of retail you're doing. But, without retail, we wouldn't have food, never mind clothes, everything else that you buy. You buy essentials. So how can that not be making a meaningful contribution to the world? We'll look into this. Because the second one was finance, which nobody got. One person mentioned insurance, and their Z's come in at very late, at 10 past 12, so just in the last 20 seconds. Z's come in with finance, which I am really surprised by. It makes me think of Gary Stevenson, who was a guest on Full Disclosure a couple of weeks ago and has an extraordinary book out now called The Trading Game, which is subtitled A Confession. And it sort of talks about the moral vacuum at the heart of the city. And that's at the high end of the city. That's the Goldman Sachs characters. That's the people making more money than most of us can ever dream of. And he describes a moral bankruptcy. It's more than a bankruptcy. It's an absence. He describes an absence of meaning at the heart of his existence that took him to some dark places, about which he writes quite beautifully. So perhaps I shouldn't have been surprised. But I thought that when you realise how meaningless it is, you do a Gary Stevenson. I hadn't considered that loads of people who are still doing it are well aware of how meaningless it is, but they're stuck. Because this is where Jeremy Hunt got himself in hot water the other day. Even if you're earning £5 million a year, you can't stop earning £5 million a year if you're spending £4.5 million a year. Do you see what I mean? If your outgoings are £4.5 million a year, if you start earning £2 million a year, your life is going to be turned upside down. Nobody's going to feel sorry for you, but your life is going to be turned upside down. So I'm not sure there is such a thing. I'd have thought that the meaningless jobs, I don't want to upset anybody here, but I'd have thought that the meaningless jobs were a bit closer to the ones that David Graeber identified, where you're looking at media, marketing, advertising, PR, forms of sales. At the top of the list, you've got medical and health services. At the bottom of the list, you've got retail and financial services. Hospitality and leisure is only just a couple of notches above financial services. This surprises me. So things you'd absolutely expect to be up there are health and education, right? And indeed they are. Quite a few people tell me, I'm a lorry driver, James, and your job's not meaningless. You come fourth. Transportation and distribution would be lost without that. Other comes third, make of that what you will. IT and telecoms comes fifth. And then in declining order, you've got media, marketing, advertising. You've got construction, manufacturing, hospitality and leisure, financial services, and retail comes last. I want to know who has had, and we're not, we've taken this quite seriously up until this point, but you can relax now. We're not taking it seriously anymore. Unless you want to ring in and talk about the difference between doing a meaningless job and a meaningful job. Oh, that's a good one from Ross. People who work for right-wing think tanks or secretly funded lobby groups, as we prefer. Well, they're not meaningless jobs. They bring great meaning to the world. People who work in secretly funded lobby groups masquerading as think tanks, Ross, actually get people like Liz Truss into Downing Street, where she can do all the wonderful things that she did for this country and to our economy that we all so fondly remember. Who's done? And if you're still doing it now, that's fine. But who can tell me about the most meaningless job imaginable? Like a job of such inexpressible meaninglessness that the rest of us will struggle to believe it. Well, the job I'll tell you what. There's two ways into this. I want you either to shock us and amuse us with the meaninglessness of your job, like putting the sticks into ice lollies or something. Do you see what I mean? Something like a job that we wouldn't even have known existed unless you told us that you used to do it. 0345 6060973. Or a job that you really did find soul-destroying. Because some of these jobs, I think, would be quite zen, wouldn't they? If you get, wax on, wax off, if you got into a routine, suddenly the whole day has gone. I loved working in retail. I loved working in retail. I don't know that I would love doing. I'm trying to think of a job that would be a really good example. Financial services. I'm surprised by the state of the chart, and what I'd like to do is examine it through the lens of personal experience. It's coming up to 12:15. So there are two questions here, effectively. The job that you did that we won't quite believe exists, right? Such as its, but not banality. Is it banality? Is that the word we're looking for? Such as its triviality, meaning. I find a word in a minute that I'm looking for. Drilling the holes in polos, suggests James in Keighley. That's not helpful. But yes, that oh my God, of course someone has to do that. And it's never occurred to me before that it might have been you. So that job there that is of such extraordinary monotony or dullness that you can't quite believe somebody has to do it. But you did. 0345 6060973, right? But then, on a slightly but not very more serious note, the job that really did destroy your soul. And this could be because of a million things. I'll tell you what mine was. And this ties in with financial services. So I got a job after fluffing my first year at university. I had to repeat the second year and pay my own fees. So I had to get a job. And I got a job selling advertising on a very early incarnation of what would sort of become the internet. So it was like an online Yellow Pages. And my job was to ring up businesses, using the real Yellow Pages actually, was to ring up businesses overseas and tell them about this amazing new computerized directory for business-to-business services that I could offer you the chance to be in. Now, I know what you're thinking already. I really do know what you're thinking, not because I'm psychic, but because now that I'm 52, it's blooming obvious. You're thinking, that sounds like a scam. And you'd be absolutely right. I didn't know it was a scam for the first 2 months I was there. And I was really, really good at it. And I sold loads and I was on big commission. I was making so much money in that 2 months of my life. I was toying with the idea of not going back to university. And then I realised it was a scam and I lasted another week. I'd love to say that I had a kind of moral awakening. And I think perhaps I did. But it wasn't an explicit moral awakening. Once I knew it was a scam, once I knew that the only people really who had ever looked at this online business directory would be the people that had bought advertising on the online business directory, the idea that it was going to be making its way into the offices of countless potential clients was hokum. One of the people that had been there a long time told me in the pub, I think that I was doing so well, they were irritated with me and they wanted to rip away my naivety. And I went back to work the following Monday and went through all of the motions and didn't sell a single contract. So I think the same thing happens here, with the time we spend together every day. I think if my heart's not in a subject, or if, for example, we're really short of things to talk about, so I pick something I'm not fully across or not fully into, however hard I work, however good a job I do in trying to generate your interest in it, I think sometimes you can tell and you don't ring me. Even if you would ring me if I was on better form that day. If I just as like a form of authenticity, like a kind of, do you know what I mean? I'm not going to point at examples and say, do you remember when we did that phone in and you didn't ring me? Well, that was because I was really distracted by the fact that Keith had just fallen over in the toilet or something like that. I mean, that do you know what I mean? When you can tell that I'm not zoomph all there. Same thing happened to me in this telesales job. And as soon as it happened, as soon as that revelation about it being a scam kicked in, I couldn't do it anymore. I tried for a week because you got your basics, so I had to finish the week. Didn't make any commission at all that week. You're going back now to 1992. It was 50 quid a week basic. And some weeks I made $2,000 in commission. That's the kind of job it was. But it was utterly soul destroying. That final week when I knew that what I was selling was worthless, found it utterly soul-destroying. Some people, of course, were absolutely brilliant at it, even though they knew that what they were selling was worthless. And I suspect that they all ended up in Parliament. It's 12:19. 22 minutes after 12. David Graeber calls it I can't say the phrase out loud. I think Ofcom would be a bit cross, but it's a BS job. Listen to this, because this is where the serious side of the conversation comes from. There is something very wrong with what we have made ourselves. We have become a civilization based on work, not even productive work, but work as an end and meaning in itself. We have come to believe that men and women who do not work harder than they wish at jobs they do not particularly enjoy are bad people, unworthy of love, care, or assistance from their communities. The main political reaction to our awareness that half the time we are engaged in utterly meaningless or even counterproductive activities is to rankle with resentment over the fact that there might be others out there who are not in the same trap. As a result, hatred, resentment and suspicion have become the glue that holds society together. I told you he was good. Hatred, resentment and suspicion have become the glue that holds society together. This is why it's the same people who will attack those with mental health problems or those who are currently unemployed or those who are poor by claiming they should be working harder. They're the same people that will attack immigrants or refugees because hatred, resentment and suspicion have become the glue that holds society together. On a less serious note, what's the most meaningless job you've ever done? And tell me a bit about the psychic toll that it can take. 24 after 12 is the time. Adrian's in Crawley. Adrian, what would you like to say?
Hi, yeah, I sound like I've got this was made for me, this phone in. I had the meaningless job. I was working for a photocopier company, worldwide name that everyone would know. And,
there's not a lot to choose from.
I know. It was.
Don't mention the war. Carry on.
Yeah, they also sell cameras.
Thank you.
Long story short, my job was to help and improve a software platform that helps salespeople sell more photocopiers. The frustrating thing was the salespeople didn't like it. They didn't like using it. They didn't want to use it. They just wanted to sell photocopiers. The management didn't like it because it cost them lots of money, and they preferred to use spreadsheets. And so I spent all the hours doing things to try and make this thing better.
Well, who hired you?
It's one of those jobs you have to have, which is kind of like that. It has to exist because you have the tool.
This has already gone Franz Kafka. No one wanted the role to be fulfilled, but it had to be filled.
You have to have someone.
You have to have a head of photocopy selling software.
That's exactly it.
Right.
That's exactly
Why
it.
did you have to have someone in that? Why did you have to have someone in that?
Because to improve it for the people who are using it and to promote it. And then when COVID came along, it was a circle I just couldn't join up. It still hurts now.
Really?
Even thinking about it. Yeah.
Why? Were you well paid?
Yeah, very well paid, mid-50s.
But you couldn't just do that thing. You couldn't just do that thing where you counted the cash and let it slide. You wanted to feel. No. You wanted to feel meaningful. Am I right?
No, because yes. I couldn't watch TV and hear about nurses and people who were doing really essential jobs that were going every day. And the crazy thing is all the salespeople got furloughed and I didn't because I was essential. And I was like, it was just pure insanity, and it drove. Yeah,
but hang on a minute. If all the salespeople have been furloughed, how on earth do they still need the bloke writing the software to help the salespeople sell more photocopiers?
Dude, you're there with me.
This is like Douglas Adams.
But I had a breakdown over it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I had to have time. I just couldn't square. You're
talking about a philosophical disconnect, aren't you? You couldn't make sense of your own existence, and that is a recipe for trouble.
That was exactly, and that's exactly what the therapist, the therapist sort of said to me as well. He said, "Look, he goes, it's not your fault. He goes, you've got the job. They offered the job.
Yeah."
And I was like, but it's photocopiers. It's the most useless thing that nobody wants anymore. And he was like, you've just got to look after your family. He goes, just take the money.
Did that work?
It did. And I realised that my family was the most important thing.
Yes.
And that I couldn't walk out the door. And I had to keep taking the money. And I kept taking the money for another year, which was the hardest year I think I've ever had in my life.
Good grief.
And I think it was because and what my manager said, who was brilliant. My manager was amazing. I was very fortunate. And he goes, it's because you don't find the work meaningful.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what the work is. If you find meaning in it and you find that it's doing something, He goes, that's what you need. But if you're not getting that, and if you want the icing on the cake, James, now work in insurance.
Do you find that writing? Yeah, but writing. Well, no, insurance is important. If your house burns down, you'd be bloody furious if you haven't got any insurance. So you write software for people selling insurance, do you?
God.
Or you sell insurance? You don't have to tell me.
No.
But are you feeling better in yourself? Are you feeling better in yourself now?
I'm much better now. Good. Yeah, because what I do is appreciated. People go, that's a great idea. What you're doing is good work. Yeah, and then what you do is it turns into something. Do you see what I mean?
Yes, I do.
That's the. Yeah, when it's on the screen, you go, that's what I've done. That now appears on the screen.
Yeah, I don't know well, Matthew wants to know if the vacancy at the photocopier company is still open.
Well, Matthew should go for it. And although saying that, when the recruiters were when the recruiters were going, Adrian, we've got this job here. What about the cat? I nearly said the company. What about that? What about that? Should we try and fill that one? I was like,
no. Been there, done that. Yeah. But that is the perfect call, actually. I mean, I've got loads of people waiting to talk, and I've kept you on for ages because you were covering so much ground and so utterly personally charming as well. And there is something about your character that's relevant to this story. Most people, I suspect, this is why I've mentioned Franz Kafka or possibly Douglas Adams or even Beckett would have, like, the character that just does nothing. It's almost like a literary trope. The Graeber wrote about the man that guards an empty room. It is the most pointless job in the world. He guards an empty room. Or in the same article that I'll share with you now on Twitter, in the same article he talks about someone whose job it was to apologise for the fact that the carpenter hadn't turned up to fix something. Who am I thinking of? What am I thinking of now in my mind? I've got something about the job. It was your job was to. It's not come to me. So there's comedy and tragedy here. Comedy in the pointlessness of the job. Tragedy in the effect it could have on someone if they are as sensitive, as attuned, as open-minded as Adrian. It's 12:30. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines. It's 12:33. James, I don't think there are any meaningless jobs. In this society, everything we do has an effect on something else and supports another aspect of society. It's a different meaning of meaningless, though. But Andy goes on, that said, I used to canvass door to door, persuading people to get quotes for new fascias and guttering. That was soul-destroying. Now, I don't know whether you've spelt soul wrong on purpose or not, because that's a really good pun. You're a door-to-door salesman. It's soul-destroying. Yeah? Got, like, soles of your shoe soles. Soles of your you see? I'm a door-to-door salesman. Oh, it's soul-destroying work. Is that an actual joke, or did we just do that together? Did we just write a joke for the first time? It's highly unlikely that joke hasn't been made before, and it's probably unlikely that I will ever make it again. I'll be with John and Mark imminently, but I want to read a couple of things first. One took me by surprise, actually. It's from Remy. I love this topic, James. I have what most people would think is a great job. I brew beer for a living as head brewer. But I honestly can't stand having a job that doesn't do anything good for the world, just making expensive alcohol to get people drunk. I wish I could make money doing something that improved the world instead. Alcohol's a tricky one, isn't it? Because I think the world would be a sadder place without it, be a worse place without it. But obviously it's far from an unalloyed good, and it can bring terrible misery into people's lives as well. This is gorgeous from Debbie, who writes, I can't tell you how helpful the last two callers on your show have been. Tomorrow I leave a job I've wrestled with for 2 years, and the photocopier caller, don't call him that, for God's sake, Adrian. His name's don't call him the photocopier caller. He'll die. And Adrian has expressed perfectly how the last 2 years have been for me. I'm leaving I'm leaving with nothing to go to because I need to look after myself. I love this from Alex. I once spent a month guarding an empty field, James. The only valuable thing in the field was the porter cabin that had been put there for me to sit in while I was guarding the field. That's perfect. And I'm going to read this one out, even though it's a tiny bit self-aggrandizing, but I didn't send it in, so I think I'll allow myself this one. The most meaningless job I ever had, James. I was a box packer in a factory. For 8 hours a day, Monday to Friday, my job was to pack A4 binders into a box that had a capacity for 28 binders. I had to count and write on the box once taped up. That's it. Minimum wage, no performance bonus. One Monday, after the second hour, I felt my brain and soul evaporate. After several weeks, I asked for a radio. A few weeks after that, I couldn't listen to music anymore, and I discovered LBC. That radio station saved my brain, and I have listened to you since the mid-'80s as a consequence. Thank you for saving my sanity during a meaningless job that was a dark time for me. Actually, that's not self-grandising at all. I was still at school in the mid-'80s, so that would be Brian Hayes or one of the greats of LBC past who was steering you, the one and only Clive Bull steering you through that difficult time. John's in Reading. John, what have you got?
I'd vouch that for listening to LBC and you, James. It really got me through my job.
Thank you.
I've got one for you. All right, it's not what you expect. Cutting grass. So doing cutting grass, trimming grass for parks and schools.
Just grass? You didn't get to work on anything else?
No, so it's one of the most soul-destroying jobs in the world. Literally, like, you're never appreciated, and it's never commented on how the grass, because it's just grass. But if the grass grows long, you'll have a teacher in the mid-60s, 70s in your face, screaming in your face, calling you every name under the sun. And you'll have to stand there. So you have to stand there for 10 minutes and
getting
listen to someone.
Up. Yeah, but that's not the grass's fault. That's the teacher.
Imagine that happening 2-3 times a week.
No, but that could happen in any job. So this job would be much worse if I had someone standing outside the studio shouting at me. I did once, actually, and it was a considerably less enjoyable job. Shouting at me every 2 or 3 days. Do you see what I mean? Some people. Have you seen the film Perfect Days, John?
No, I haven't. Is it any good?
Yeah, it's about a Japanese toilet cleaner.
Oh, that sounds interesting, though.
It is one of the best films I've seen in a very long time. And I suspect that if the lead character in that film had been doing your job, he would have found a kind of Zen-like peace in the repetition. Yes, because cutting grass is quite wax on, wax off, isn't it?
So, for example, in ground maintenance in the UK, the average wage is $21,000 a year.
Well, I don't think there's much money in cleaning toilets in Tokyo either, John.
No, but the thing is, because of this, there's a real massive health crisis, basically, for maintenance workers. The managers that I used to work with, one was an alcoholic,
right,
who used to come in smelling like alcohol.
Oh, Lord.
One of them was on suicide watch. Other one,
why? Why was partly because the pay was so low?
Because the pay is so low, you work out all day. You're soaked out, like you're completely soaked every day. It's been raining. And you're required to work. You'll get to schools where you're having to. Bear in mind, it is schools. You have to work around children, and the risk of basically working with children, anyone can understand that, especially teachers. Then, for example, like I had, basically, where I was working, maybe doing 10 jobs a day, doing 3 or 4 schools, trying to utterly
thankless. So you're talking about soul-destroying work, then. Even though some people would think, I'd love to work outside, I'd love to work with nature. It's the people that ruin it.
So then I'd skip my lunch breaks. I'd skip all my breaks to actually fit all the jobs in. I didn't have a lunch break for 5 months, where you come back to the office and you have a manager screaming in your face saying, why haven't you got all the jobs done in the day? And it's like, because the other lads are off sick from mental health, and then you're covering 2-man rounds for an entire week, and then it led me basically to have a mental breakdown.
I can tell it took a heavy toll on you, mate. I really can. Yeah. That's extraordinary, because it's, as you said at the beginning, it's not a job you'd have put on the list, is it, necessarily, when you were trying to imagine what the most soul-destroying jobs might be?
Yeah, and so I'd say this to people listening, is that value your maintenance people who do cut the grass at the schools. Don't come up to them and be horrible to them. I understand that there is a lot of problems out there in the maintenance industry, and it is pay. No one wants to do it. The only people who actually get into maintenance is through the job centre, because they force you into doing either the summer contracts or just actually getting into it. I know lads who are really, really excited, really, really smiley. They get into the job, and within 3 weeks, they've turned to me and went, I'm going to quit.
Good Lord.
Because I can't. Because I said, I can't do this.
What are you doing now?
Ground maintenance.
Oh, you're still...
But I actually get paid really, really well.
That didn't go where I thought we were going to have one of those little radio moments there.
My boss is actually really amazing, the new one. I get paid above the market average. I can choose my hours roughly, as long as I get all the work done. But my health dramatically improved.
Well, you sound happy. You sound happy. But what was strange?
The first time in years I've actually cracked a real smile, and people know when they mean that. I turned to my boss and went, "Do you know, it's the first time I've actually smiled, but
John.
like genuinely smiled in like years." And he went, "That's fine, that's glad, but it's many more to come." And I was like, "Man, you don't." And I broke down in tears in front of my new boss.
What a lovely thing to say. There's many more smiles to come. That's gorgeous. That's such a lovely thing, John. What a lovely story. You've taken me everywhere in the course of this. We've only been on for about 6 minutes. We've done the whole thing. We've been on a roller coaster, haven't we?
No, it's
so next time you see someone mowing the lawn, particularly at schools, because you're not going to be on site, are you? You're going to be covering several schools, so you hard to strike up relationships with other members of staff. Just be a bit nice. Just be a bit bloody nicer. It's not that hard, is it? John, you've done a great service for all of us there. Proper pause for thought, actually. You really have. Can I ask you a question before you go?
Crack on. Go on.
All right. And I'm not taking the mick, I promise you. You'll be able to tell that I'm not as soon as I ask you the question. So I've got a new lawnmower, right?
Oh, no. Okay, what one? Go on.
It's an Atco. So it's a decent one. It's rechargeable. It's battery powered, but it's got a bit of heft to it, and it's got
battery powered.
Pardon?
You said battery powered.
Yeah.
I know where this conversation's going already. Go on.
It's nothing to do with that. It's got a roller on the back.
Yeah.
Is there a trick to get your stripes like Wimbledon, to get your absolutely pristine stripes on your lawn when you're mowing it? Do I have to
practice? But
is that all?
Or that's a really weird tip that I learned from someone: is look at the actual line at the far end. Don't look at your line at the ground. Look at the far end.
Right.
And pick your point, and then you'll naturally go towards that point. Because if you look at the ground, you're going to wobble with the ground.
There you go. You see?
Yeah, like you're a drunk.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well, if you want to add
that's what I want. I'm focusing on the end of the garden, not the beginning of the garden.
Do you know something interesting for you, James?
Yeah,
here's
go on.
an interesting fact, right?
Yeah?
You like facts, right?
I'm here for this all day long.
Do you know the UK is the only country in the world that actually has striped lawns?
No, I didn't know that.
Because the entire European market is based upon the concept of actually mulching grass.
Right.
We're the only country in the world that actually has striped lawns. And I went to a convention and he went, yeah, we're the only country in the world that actually have lawnmowers built with rollers.
But what you can still mulch? Oh, you mean they leave the grass on the lawn in other countries?
So what you're talking about right now, so the roller on the back, they don't have rollers.
No, but why not?
Because they don't need to. They literally go, well, there's no point of having stripes. But I can mulch it.
It's just never caught on. There's never been any. So, but by mulch, you mean you leave the grass cuttings on the lawn, or you collect them?
Apologies. I understand. I misunderstood. I miscommunicated that. So basically, what I mean is when you have the finished product at the end. Yeah. In UK, you have a roller on the back, and you see stripes back and forth, dark white.
But just because we want
Europe,
to, they don't care.
Yeah. Just in Europe, basically, it's literally they'll go over without a roller, and they'll cut it all up and smash it to the ground, and it'll just look like it's just been cut.
Well, bloody heathens, aren't they? You can't.
Bloody Europeans. Glad we left, eh?
Oh, well played. It's 12:49. A lot of love for John, but I think this is the one he'd most appreciate from Victoria. I'm a head teacher, and I'm going to deliberately go outside and thank our grounds maintenance team after hearing your last caller. We don't shout at them, but equally we don't go out and tell them they're appreciated. And now I come to think of it, they do look quite grumpy. Now I know why. Thank you, John. And a lot of people had exactly the same reaction I had there, which I think can only be loosely described as uncontrolled laughter, which, funnily enough, I needed today. And that cuts both ways, because I'm getting lots of messages telling me how much you value LBC and even perhaps this programme in particular. But it cuts both ways, it really does. And that was a perfect example of it. Well played, mate. Good job. 12:49. Matt's in Hitchin. Matt, what made you pick up the phone?
I had to pull over, and I hope I can help make the laughter continue. Audit, and more specifically, audit that involves a stock take, and more specifically, audit involving a stock take for small companies where the directors and shareholders are the same people. So my worst example of this is in my lovely suit at about the age of 21, being sent to a place that rents out portable toilets to festivals and things like that.
Yeah.
So the management and the people that looked after their stock had already counted them. So my job was to count them again to make sure that they could count. So I'm in a muddy field, surrounded by around 200.
I don't know that this
toilets.
is pointless though, because you're checking for fraud as much as anything else, aren't you?
No, not really.
Of course you are. Someone could have nicked a toilet.
Nah.
So it'd be an inside job. That's why it's an inside job, wouldn't it? So if I'm doing the count, I can flog a couple of carsies to Dirty Gertie at number 30, and then if you didn't come along and check, I'd get to be the perfect crime.
There are some good examples of that. There's an olive oil scandal, which I probably won't have time to go into, but having counted the toilets that somebody else had already counted, I have to present that as my report, which will eventually go to the shareholders.
Did you go like this? Did you go, when you were counting, did you go number 1? Number 2?
If only.
How often do you lose count? I mean, are you doing it like in an analogue fashion?
It happens. It's better than washers and cables. Cables were quite disheartening.
So you've got quite an array. I mean, you just count anything.
Anything. Meat. My favourite one was gold in Hatton Garden. That was a good one.
Yes.
Because I got to count gold. But other than that,
so a lot of people are reminding us. Here's an interesting thing, Matt. A lot of people are reminding us that it doesn't matter if you've got a really boring job, if you're working with people you get on with. But all of the calls we've had today have been solitary jobs, haven't they, really?
Yeah.
That's the point. Yeah. That's the point.
I think standing there, because, and you work with suits, but I had a lovely, nice new suit, nice shoes. I didn't think for a second I'd be standing up to my shins in whatever, counting toilets.
Does it help you sleep?
It was awful. No, it didn't, funnily enough. Static caravans, they helped me sleep.
And did it? You got out.
I did, yeah. But, the static caravans, because I got tired walking around counting them, so that was one way to get off to sleep. But I was saying to your researcher, I got so bored waiting for work sometimes when it dried up. In a cubicle with no computer, I started writing poetry.
Oh, that's nice.
As an audit junior.
Okay.
Yeah. Not quite what I was paid to do.
But still.
But I got to that point of going slightly nuts, to the point where I did actually walk off the job once.
And what are you doing now?
Meat slices.
I'm a poet. I'm the poet laureate.
Director.
I'm the poet laureate, Joe.
I wish.
The finance director. So you're still counting, but it's a much more satisfying work.
I now know what's important and what isn't.
That's
so I
nicely
advise
put.
my staff, don't waste your time on stuff that means nothing.
Beautifully put. Although I still stand by the necessity of checking for fraud. If you're doing a stock take, there are reasons why. I once did a stock take in the shoe stock room at River Island in Worcester, and I was so hungover, I built an igloo out of shoe boxes and had a sleep and just filled in random numbers on the stock take form. And it was not long before leaving. So think about the damage that I've handed down through the generations of shop assistants at River Island in Worcester. There may well still be a pair of pink kickers that theoretically exist, but actually I marked them as existing when they didn't. And some poor later incarnation of me is going to have got it in the neck for not being able to find the pink kickers that I insisted. I missed a joke there, which my Scottish listeners have pointed out, and you can't really do jokes in retrospect. But when I was talking about the toilets being stolen, I should have said it. My Scottish listeners, I suspect, have picked up on this one. I should have said it was an inside jobby, not an inside job. If you don't understand that, get a Scottish friend to translate. Mark's in Wolverhampton. Mark, what would you like to say? I nearly said question or answer then, because I'm in a mystery hour mood now. I've been laughing so much. I know, but I've been laughing so much. I've got the mystery hour mood upon me. Mark, what would you like to say?
I would like to tell you about when I was at uni many moons ago and got a summer job at an ice cream factory in Gloucester.
Fantastic.
And my job was to put pieces of sellotape onto 4 packs of cornettos as they went past.
On the box, not on the.
On the box.
Yeah.
We weren't trusted to put them in the box. They were already in the box. Our job was just to put the sellotape onto the cardboard as they slid past for 8 weeks.
Now, I suspect that production line work is, like a few of our messages have mentioned, it's one of those things where you can actually build up a bit of camaraderie with other people, so it's not as boring.
You'd think.
Oh.
But I managed to have one of my biggest will the earth open up and swallow me moments on my very first day, as I'm standing opposite the guy I'm going to be standing opposite for the next 8 weeks. And I say to him, did you have the same pain in the arse of a nurse for your medical? And he turned around and said, yeah, it's my mum.
Oh, okay. So, I mean...
So let's just say the relationship wasn't that great.
How long did you last?
I lasted the 8 weeks. I needed the money.
So summer holiday job kind of thing. And did you Did you get all the cornettos you could eat, or was it one of those sort of jobs?
No, because they came out and they're frozen with nitrogen, so they're absolutely solid. But what you can do is, if you get a cornetto, you can smash the end off on the metal bit of the production facility, and you can eat the chocolate at the end.
I mean, that's a lot of trouble to go to for the sake of a chocolate nib, but after 8 weeks, I suppose you'd just be glad of the distraction. I don't know if it's as meaningless as some of the other jobs that we've heard, but it's certainly up there. I'd lost my favourite because my WhatsApp. Is there anything we can do about that? I know what you're going to say. I should have put it in the other thing where I can save them and read them out later. But someone was a match tester. If you're the match tester, you've got 3 minutes to send me that message again so that I can read it out properly. Otherwise, I'll do it from memory. All right. So this is a message for the former match tester. Boom, boom, boom. Have you got it? Have you got the? We got. Yes, here we go. This is sensational from Kieran. How did you do that? Can we search stuff on? Oh, no one tells me anything. Hi, James. The most meaningless job I ever had was a match tester. I had to strike a match for every 500 matches produced. Money was good, which was the only thing keeping me there. That's just sensational. So every 500 matches, you have to take a match off and just strike it to make sure that the production processes are all in place. Joseph's in Uxbridge, which is what will probably be the last word. What's it going to be, Joseph?
Oh, yeah, it will be the last word, I hope. Great show, and you really have some wonderful callers.
We've been blessed today, in every hour, actually, but I think John might have taken the crown. Go on.
Oh, I enjoyed the doctors earlier on.
Yes.
Very similar student job in the summer, mid-80s, topping and turning sandwiches on a conveyor belt. Do you notice with the pre-packed sandwiches, you always get a crust?
Yes.
And the job was very simple. Turn the sandwich and wait for somebody just moved along the conveyor belt.
Just literally flipping it. Literally flipping it.
Turning it over, and that was the job. And very sadly, in some ways, I lasted 2 days. I was very lucky. But what was really sad was a lot of people there were agency workers, refrigerator conditions, freezing cold, 5:30 start on shifts, and so depressing for them. I was okay. I ended up teaching English, and it was.
It's a very natural career progression, that I find.
Very much so.
Most English teachers I meet have done a stint as a sandwich flipper.
I've got one other, if you don't mind. In the first school I worked in, we had a competition, charity competition for the students, where we had a list of jobs that their teachers had done in the summer. And my favourite always was that one of the science teachers had washed bodies in a morgue, and none of the students ever got the right person. And I was thinking the sandwich topper and turner, that was bad, but I'm not sure I
don't want to be the corpse washer. Wow, good Lord. This always happens to me when we end up. It's John's fault. So John makes me laugh that much. It releases some chemicals. Thank you, Joseph. That's a perfect conclusion. It's a particularly pleasant programme. I start looking, so I should have had with Kieran. Someone else could have done this. Keith, what are you doing? You could have done this. You normally whispering alleged jokes in my ear. So I'm going to do it again with the joke, just for Sheila. Dear James, the most meaningless job I ever had was a match tester. I had to strike a match for every 500 matches produced. The money was good, which was the only thing keeping me there. Love, Kieran. Well, you could have gone on strike.
Oh, that's a dad joke if ever there was one.
It's classic.
Classic dad joke.
If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, the official LBC app, where you can also pause and rewind live radio. Download now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick. But now, it's time for Sheila Fogarty. 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 It's time for Sheila Fogarty.